Hello guys! I'm so glad to be back to making videos. Do you know what happened? I spilled water on my laptop and it got damaged. Well, I'm so glad now because I've got it back and I'm back to making videos. This time I'm going to make a video on E. Cummings's poem, Buffalo Bills. E. Cummings is a modernist poet from America, and he's a pattern poet. Many of his poems are in the shape of patterns. And like an imagist poet, he wrote in a very cryptic, very condensed style. And it is wonderful to look at his poems because they are a class by themselves. They're a type of poetry that we all need to know deeply. So this is a poem that is prescribed in some examinations. So I'm dealing with Buffalo Bills. It is not by mistake that I have put one space here before the apostrophe. It is like that in the title. And I've put one American bison or buffalo here. What is this Buffalo Bills? Very strange title. E. Cummings lived from 1894 to 1962. Edward Estlin Cummings, that was his name. He was born in Cambridge. Don't worry, that is not the Cambridge in the UK. This is in Massachusetts in the USA. Many places in America are named after the English counterparts. E. Cummings was the son of a Harvard English professor who later became the congregational minister of the famous Old South Church in Boston. Now, this is New England, and it's a very religious place. And E. Cummings was born to the son of a minister, as the son of a minister. And the father was a great influence on our poet. Cummings attended the Cambridge Latin High School where he studied Greek and Latin. You will expect him to grow up into a very classical, mythological poet, but that is far from what he was. Based on his classical scholarship, he had a classical outlook, perhaps, like all modernists had, but his style was completely new. He earned both his BA and MA degrees from Harvard University, and he served as a volunteer ambulance driver in France in World War I. Many Americans served as volunteer ambulance drivers in the First World War. Our Ernest Hemingway is another, and E. Cummings was part of the lost generation along with Ernest Hemingway. He experimented radically with form, punctuation, spelling, and syntax. E. Cummings did not write in the traditional style. He wrote in a very radically new form, using punctuation, spelling, syntax, all in new ways to convey meaning. And he abandoned traditional techniques and structures to create a new, highly idiosyncratic means of poetic expression. He wrote in a very unique, idiosyncratic style. And he was part of the lost generation. All the lost generation writers were influenced by Gertrude Stein and modernism. And they were all people who were interested in formal transformations or formal changes. E. Cummings, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, even T.S. Eliot are part of the lost generation. It was Gertrude Stein who called them the lost generation. Cummings was mostly self-published, and he began writing his name in lowercase. We do not write E. Cummings with any uppercase letters. He was not only a poet, he was a painter as well, and he became the second most widely read poet in America after Robert Frost. Now, this is a surprise because for an ordinary, unsuspecting reader, E. Cummings's poetry looks, in the first glance, very difficult. You cannot make sense of what he's trying to say. The contemporary reader will be baffled. But in America at that time, he became the second most widely read poet after Robert Frost. And Robert Frost's style was very different from E. Cummings's style. Cummings' poems questioned and disrupted literary and social complacency. In Buffalo Bills, you can see the same questioning of the social complacency about attitudes. Now, this is E. Cummings, Edward Estlin Cummings. Let us take a quick look at his major works. There is a famous autobiographical novel that recounts his war experiences. Remember, he was in the war. Ambulance driver he was. And the autobiographical novel that he wrote about it is called The Enormous Room. That came in 1922, the same year as Ulysses. Tulips and Chimneys came the next year. It is his first book of collection of poems. His first collection of poetry is Tulips and Chimneys. He made use of the typographical distortion. He used typography using the typewriter. He typed out his poems in a very new manner. There is unpredictability in punctuation, capitalization, word spacing, and word arrangement. This is 46, I think, XLI poems. No, what is it? It is a second book of collection of poems. These are very famous actually. Tulips and Chimneys, the titles are very famous. He has also written a play, an avant-garde play, a very experimental play, Hymn, 1927. Now, let us take a look at some representative poems. Before we come to Buffalo Bills, let us condition our minds to understand E. Cummings by looking at some other poems quickly, because otherwise you'll be completely baffled by his totally new style. Take a sentence or a statement like this. Grasshopper, who as we look up, now gathering into the leaps, arriving to become arrangingly grasshopper. He wrote this sentence and cut it up in different ways and made this up. What is this? This is the poem. When you read the poem, it feels like it gives a feeling of the grasshopper jumping about from one part of the grass to the other. Look at the first thing here. It is a word. Grasshopper, the word is jumbled up. The letters are jumbled up. Grasshopper, who, as we look, but some of the words are same thing. As we look, but some of the letters and words are strangely in brackets. Ilu, up now, gat, a ring is here, but in between there is a grasshopper again. Up now, gat, a ring into the, suddenly a capital. What is the use of this bracket here and colon here? The jumbled grasshopper is interrupting this statement as well. Leap. See, the jump of the grasshopper is represented in this leap. Leaps. S is here. Arriving. A is here. Arriving. The word arriving does not arrive here. It is split up. Again, grasshopper is cut up here. 2. Become. It is in brackets and it is interrupted by arrangingly. Become and arrangingly are jumbled up. The parts of these words are jumbled up. What is this? Let us try reading it. Rpofr grass, who as we look up now gat pagor grass ring into the leaps, arriving rap sop sop sip 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 sip. Rebiran kong jinging ling grasshopper. Have you ever seen a grasshopper jump about? It jumps about here, you suddenly see it there, then you don't see it anymore, and suddenly it comes and bleeps. The poem is like that, the words are like that, the syllables are like that, leaping about, jumping about, creating a feeling rather than stating anything. This is like images poetry. Nothing is stated. There is no theme. There is no message. Just a feeling. Just a little bit, a snapshot of a leaping about grasshopper. And the meaning should be created by you in your mind. And also, he's creating the picture of a grasshopper here. If you draw lines like this, it looks like this is a grasshopper's head. These are the legs, wings. See, there's a grasshopper sitting here in the poem. Wow. It's a totally new experience of poetry. This is completely unconventional. This is not what you expect from a poem. Ah, beautiful. The sky was. Think of the sky. Think of the clouds in the sky. Think of rain falling in the sky. Think of the colors that are splashed on the sky. And then read this poem. The sky was candy luminous. Edible Sprite, pinks, shy lemons, greens, cool chocolates. Under a locomotive spouting violets. There is a splash of colors here. You don't see anything clearly in the sky. There is some blue and green and orange and pink and everything mixed up, and clouds are also like that, mixed up. The smoke coming up from the locomotive is also like that. Locomotive means vehicle. It is a feeling rather than a solid color like this yellow here. It is a splash of colors, a splash of words, a splash of meanings that you see in this poem. Isn't that beautiful? Wow. And then, wow, what is this? Loneliness, one word. And in between, the word is interrupted and a leaf falls is written in brackets inside that word. La leaf falls, loneliness. A single leaf falling quietly, spluttering in the wind, and slowly it's falling and reaching the ground. Is an expression of loneliness. This is like a life. How you live and finally somehow stumble and alone you die. You understand? There is a loneliness in this leaf that sits inside this word loneliness. There is a loneliness in this word where the L is separated from oneliness. Oneliness, uniqueness. There is so much here. Created by this bracket, by this space, by this breaking up of the words. It's an amazing poem. The more you look at it, even though there's nothing here, just a word or two. But the more you look at it, the more you feel it. The more you can talk about it. You can write a whole essay about it. Isn't it beautiful? And now our poem. Buffalo Bills. Actually, there is a space here. I took it from the internet like this. Buffalo Bills defunct. Defunct? That is not a word you use about a man. Buffalo Bill was a man. It was the nickname given to actually a cowboy, a hero of America. We'll come to that. Buffalo Bills defunct, who used to ride a water-smooth silver stallion and break 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pigeons just like that. Jesus, he was a handsome man. And what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? Buffalo Bill is dead, he's no more. When he was alive, he used to ride a magnificent stallion, water-smooth silver, Wow. And break, tuck, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pigeons, just like that. Good shot he was. Jesus, he was a handsome man. He was a handsome man. He was one hero. Everybody looked up to him and loved him. And what did he do? He killed buffaloes. That's why he's called Buffalo Bill. He killed pigeons and shot clay pigeons. And he killed people too, I guess. These cowboys killed Native Americans. They ill-treated the African Americans. They used slaves. And now he's dead. What has happened to his heroism? What has happened to all his killing? Now he is himself no more. And what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? Death is there for everyone. He's there. He's with us all the time. And once we are dead, all your heroism is gone. There is a sudden, shocking bitterness and satire here in this poem. The first time you read this poem, defunct is disturbing. That is not what you say about a hero. So we get the feeling that he doesn't mean that Buffalo Bill is a hero. This is not a poem that completely praises Buffalo Bill. And at the end, it becomes clear. It is a satire on heroism, on America's cherished values, on America's pretensions, on the horrendous things in American past, like cowboy culture, which is a great thing for the whites, but cowboy culture involves a lot of destruction to nature. It involved a lot of oppression of the African Americans, and also it involved the obliteration or destruction of the Red Indians or the Native Americans. So, E. Cummings in the 20th century seems to be asking, so what has happened to all that he did? His heroism, his greatness. Now he's also dead. It's a whimsical poem about a hero. Well, that is not the end of the discussion of the poem. I have not even begun. Let us go on and talk about the presentation of the poem on the page. E. Cummings, like William Carlos Williams, who wrote Red Wheelbarrow, was heavily influenced by technology. In their case, the typewriter. They used the typewriter to type out their poems in totally new ways, giving new meanings. Williams typed his poems over and over again, breaking it up in many different ways to see how it lay on the page. He experimented with the presentation of the words on the page, because every space, every change in space or punctuation makes a new meaning. Like William Carlos Williams would say, so much depends on the presentation of the page, on the presentation of the words on the page. So much depends on a red wheelbarrow placed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Apparently, the red wheelbarrow is a very simple thing, silly thing. Nobody even cares about it, but so much depends on it. Like that, this poem, the poems that E. Cummings writes look like childish poems. They look like nonsense, but so much depends upon the way these words are presented on the page. Cummings focused entirely on the text and typography instead of the oral tradition. Rather than focus on orality and revive it in writing, he focused entirely on writing and the presentation of the words on the page. The poem is a gun, I have written here. What do you mean by that? Can you identify a gun here? Is there a gun here? Ta-da-dang, ta-da-dang. Is this a gun? This way, that way. Is this a gun? Is this the muzzle of the gun? Where is the gun? Ta-da-dang, ta-dang, tang. This is a rifle, a rancher's rifle. Look at this part. Look at this. This is like a gun. Wow. What did this George Anderson say about Cummings? Idiosyncratic and eccentric. Cummings's verse experiments with typography, with slang, dialect, with jazz rhythms. At the time Cummings was writing, it was the outbreak of the jazz period. The jazz age was the 1920s onwards. Cummings was a 1920s poet. The lost generation writers are 1920s writers. They were heavily influenced by jazz. Influence of jazz rhythms. Please listen to jazz and then you'll understand. It is almost like how I read Grasshopper. And the jagged lines that mimic the sound or movement of his subjects. The very shape of his poems emphasize the forms of human expression. He is breaking free from the boring tyranny of grammar and syntax of traditional language. And he is using language in completely new ways to mimic human expression. Now, a look at the context of the poem. The American frontier. You have to know about it. Frontier is the imaginary line or area of open and free land in the West. The open and free land in the West, lying outside the white settlements in the East. In the east of United States, there were the settlements. I will show this using a map after this slide. In the eastern part, that is, imagine this is the map of United States. In the eastern part of United States, here were all the settlements. The western part here was forest. This is the area of the Native Americans or the Red Indians. The Mississippi River is the boundary. So the imaginary line that separates the eastern settlements from the western forest area, that is called the frontier. The frontier refers to the geography, history, folklore, and culture associated with American expansion to the west. The settlements in the east wanted to expand to the west. They built railroads, they built towns here, and America expanded. The frontier that was here kept receding to the west. As the white settlements in the east grew, the frontier kept receding to the west. The frontier began to be discussed starting from the early 17th century. And the discourse of the frontier kind of ends in the 20th century. When the entire America is civilized, the frontier is in the far west now. The frontier has moved and fallen into the Pacific Ocean. And in this side of America is Atlantic Ocean. In this side is Pacific Ocean. Here is Europe. So, Americans talked about the frontier. The frontier was a very important influence in American culture from the early 17th century to the 20th century. And the frontier played a central role in shaping American culture, iconography, and the modern national identity. The frontier gave rise to the concept of the Wild West. The people who were in the settlements in the East wanted to travel to the West. Their dream was to travel to the West because they thought that in the West there is free money, free for all land, no man's land beyond the frontier. So they wanted to travel west. Like you see in Huckleberry Finn, Huck wants to travel west. In Death of a Salesman, Biff wants to travel west. In the west is California. So the frontier gave rise to the concept of the Wild West. which also refers to the period 1865 to 95, immediately after the Civil War. Immediately after the Civil War, even though legally the African Americans are emancipated, culturally, psychologically, for the whites to start respecting them, it took a long time. The frontier gave rise to institutions such as cowboy culture, the American dream, and the genre of the westerns. Westerns in Hollywood movies. You may have watched movies like The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. Clint Eastwood is an archetypal cowboy in Hollywood. So the westerns in movies as well as literature, the mythical cowboys who became like that was a very short-lived culture, but it had a huge impact because of the mythification of the cowboys in Hollywood movies, that is. And it gave rise to the American dream, the idea that Americans can get success, they can get money, they can go to the West. Pride in Americanness, all that shattered at the beginning of the 20th century. Cummings is writing at a time when the American dream is shattered. Buffalo Bills is about the shattering of the American dream or the American concept of the hero. Buffalo Bills, the poem, is about an American hero. There is a museum in his name and people respected him. Still they respect him. But he represents the American dream in a way. And Cummings is showing the shattering of the American dream in the 1920s in this poem, when he says Buffalo Bills defunct. And how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? That satire shows the crashing of the American dream or the concept of heroism that Buffalo Bills represented. Now let us take a look at the map of the United States. So this is the map of the USA. This is the eastern part of the nation. We have Europe here. This is the Atlantic Ocean. And this is New England. The settlements, earliest settlements, were all in the east. And there was an imaginary line that separated the eastern settlements from the western forest areas. And as the eastern settlements grew, the frontier kept moving. This is called the frontier hypothesis of Frederick Jackson Turner. And in the Civil War, the fight was between the northern states that supported the abolition of slavery and the southern states, these states, they wanted slavery because they were heavily dependent on plantations. Aristocratic families who lived here depended on plantations and the slaves had to work there. So let us proceed. The cowboy era came immediately after the Civil War. The Civil War was from 1861 to 65. The cowboy era is 1865 to 1890, that period. The cowboys are the ranchers and cattle herders. There were ranchers and cattle herders, especially in the southern states. And these cowboys have been romantically mythified. Their life and culture, especially, have been mythified by the Western movies of Hollywood. Westerns, the genre of Hollywood, has mythified the cowboy culture and life. They had their own harsh life and culture of frontier values. The cowboys had a harsh life of frontier values, both positive and negative values. Positive values such as self-dependence, chivalry and patriotism, and negative values where cowboys were stereotyped as associated with violence, criminality, fighting with Native Americans. And sometimes the cowboys were associated with the rednecks also. Redneckism means racism, particularly of the rural southern America. You see that kind of redneckism in To Kill a Mockingbird, for example. It's a very negative word. And cowboy culture became a commodity. A lot of cowboys and their descendants began to conduct Wild West shows. They went around showing how they can shoot clay pigeons, how they can fight, how they can ride horses. Wild West shows they were called. And rodeos. There are rodeos happening even now. In the past, in the rodeos, atrocious things happened. Such as they would ride horses and spear one calf to death, chase a Native American boy on horseback for everybody's pleasure. All this was like an exhibition of their sportsmanship. And rodeos were also associated with Red Indian culture and the selling of it. Rodeos were associated with redneckism and violence and racism. When I was in Canada doing my PhD, I visited a rodeo and there was a lot of protest there against the ill treatment of animals in the rodeos. Now, who is this Buffalo Bill? Buffalo Bill is based on an American legendary hero named William F. Cody. Buffalo Bill Cody, he is called. William F. Cody. He was an American soldier. He was not actually a cowboy, but he was a hunter and later showman because he went around doing Wild West shows and made money like that. During the American Civil War, he served the Union from 1863 to the end of the war in 1865. Later, he served as a civilian scout for the U.S. Army during the American Indian Wars. So he was a hunter, not only of buffaloes, but also people. Definitely, he must have killed a lot of people during this time. He received a Medal of Honor for all that. This is why E. Cummings is talking about him in a satirical vein. He received a Medal of Honor in 1872, which is America's highest and most prestigious military award. He received the nickname Buffalo Bill when he had a contract to supply Kansas Pacific Railroad workers with buffalo meat. He got the order to provide buffalo meat to the railroad workers, and he killed a large number of buffaloes, even unnecessarily. Apart from killing Native Americans in hordes, that also they did. Not just Cody, all the men, the soldiers. He is also believed to have killed about 4,282 buffaloes. Look at the atrocity that he did to nature. Because in America, till the 20th century, they believed that nature is the enemy. Nature versus man. That is a theme in American literature. So, in 18 months between 1867 and 68, Buffalo Bill killed 4,282 buffaloes, it seems. Unbelievable atrocity. And this is the hero we are talking about. It is said that he killed off huge numbers of buffaloes so that the not only he and his people, so that the Native Americans would starve to death. That is one reason they killed off all these buffaloes, because they wanted to finish off the Native Americans who were their enemies. Can you believe it? The American cowboys, like Buffalo Bill, exterminated trillions of wood pigeons also. In Buffalo Bill Museum, it is written there very famously that Buffalo Bill did not, even though he was very good at killing pigeons, that means he must have killed hundreds and thousands. That is why he got very good at it. At the end, he started using clay pigeons. Clay pigeon is a saucer-shaped disc that they used for target practice. And he used clay pigeons instead. He stopped killing the pigeons after they all killed trillions of wood pigeons. Many of these species became extinct. It is unspeakably horrifying what they did. I found this in the website, The Art of Manliness. The Art of Manliness. How to shoot clay pigeons. The clay pigeon will be shot from a machine. Ching, it will fly like that. And as it flies, you have to shoot it. The pigeon's flight path will always remain constant. So you should practice shooting at it. You should stand like this and shoot like this. The art of manliness. Such a man was Buffalo Bill. In 1883, he founded the Great Wild West Show and toured Europe and the United States with his team. Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show was well known over America and Europe for many years. He was most famous for the shows he organized with cowboy themes. Buffalo Bill became a hero of myth and fiction, a heroic figure of the frontier West in America. He became a hero and he began to represent a certain image of America. And Cummings is kind of breaking that image in this poem. Buffalo Bill, this is the man, Cody. William Cody. Jesus, he was a handsome man. The summary of the poem. Buffalo Bill's defunct. This is the first two lines. Buffalo Bill, the legendary hero, is introduced rather satirically here because he says defunct. Doesn't work anymore. That is the meaning of defunct. And the spacing, there is a space before the apostrophe. Buffalo Bill's spacing makes it ambiguous. Does it refer to what Buffalo Bill possessed? Or is it a contraction of Buffalo Bill is? It could also suggest pluralization. Buffalo Bills, because it is not just one man. This is referring to all the ranchers like him. This is not just one man. Buffalo Bills, that community of people, they are all defunct. They don't work anymore. We don't need them. The word defunct is emphasized by being placed alone in a line. It literally means that which is no longer functioning or existing. That which is no longer functioning. It usually does not refer to a man. It means probably that Buffalo Bill is no more. That is why he's talked about like an object, like a machine. He has no utility value now. Defunct is not a dignified word for the death of a hero. Buffalo Bill has lost his importance as a person. We don't believe in that culture anymore. We shouldn't. So the suggestion is that the reference is to more than the death of the man. It refers to the age. It refers to the culture of white heroism and redneckism itself, racism, as being defunct. We are past that age. We have moved past that age. Who used to ride a water-smooth silver stallion. See, the word stallion is kept separately, emphasizing it. And break. He doesn't say kill. He says break. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pigeons, just like that. Tuck, 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 tuck. Like that, he kills pigeons. Or he breaks clay pigeons. This is the depiction of an idealistic hero. An idealistic hero riding a great stallion. The depiction of his ability to ride horses. His skill with guns. through which he could kill multiple pigeons easily or break multiple clay pigeons, whichever. It refers to the romantic age of the American Wild West. Everybody wanted to be like that in those days. They wanted to go Wild West. The words and broken lines trailing behind one another evokes the supporters of the Wild West image and its culture. Everybody flocked behind the heroes in those days. Like these words are all flocking behind the stallion. White stallion represents potency because stallion is a horse used for breeding. Potency, elite power, and masculine grandeur. Buffalo Bill is himself like a stallion, masculine, powerful, grandeur. Water smooth silver points to the shining of the horse. He's polished and shining. And metaphorically, it refers to the shining glamour of Bill himself. The poem does not mention that he killed people. He was in the war. Obviously, he must have killed hundreds or thousands of people. That is why he is such a good shot. He could hit off several clay pigeons. That is why break. With one shot, it is said, it is legendary. Whether it's true or false, we don't know. But the legend is that he could, with one shot, hit many clay pigeons. This shows heroism coupled with showmanship. It is also a show off. Cody eventually became a showman. And this culture is not a necessity. It is like a show. It shows that heroism and fame both have flimsy foundations and are ephemeral. Because from the beginning we know, even though in the middle of the poem we are told that he's a hero, from the beginning we know that heroism is defunct. Buffalo Bill has lost his relevance and he has been taken by death. Jesus, he was a handsome man. The exclamation Jesus shows that the poet also approves of Buffalo Bill's appearance and image. He liked Buffalo Bill. He was indeed a handsome man. He means it, the poet. The word Jesus also imparts a colloquial touch. It is actually a subversion of religion. It is not used in a religious manner, that word. Bill performed miracles like breaking many clay pigeons in one shot, etc. Like Jesus. Was Jesus also a showman? Is that what E. Cummings is trying to say? It's ambiguous. This is perhaps a very subtle dig at religion as well. The reality of the man should be separated from the impression that he created in America's consciousness. The reality of the man and the image of the man, they are two different things, this poem tells us. It is more about the show, it is more about the impression that made him America's representative. There is a suggestion that the impression was larger than the reality. Jesus, he was a handsome man. Also means, Jesus, he was such a hero. But then what has happened to him now? Where is he? How does Mr. Death like his blue-eyed boy now? The hero's macho skills and racial supremacy, or good looks, or the terrific impression that he made on the Americans. Nothing saved him from meeting his inevitable fate. Ultimately, all that amounts to nothing. He could not be saved from death. He was like a man who meted out death to people and animals. He killed so many people, and finally, the irony is that death took him. So that is the ending of the poem. And what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? Cynically making fun of America's past glorification of Wild West culture. You did so many bad things in America in the past in the name of Wild West. What do you think about that now? Buffalo Bill loved to bring death upon buffaloes and humans also. Now, how does death like him? Blue-eyed boy indicates not only Buffalo Bill's heroism, but also the ideology of white supremacy, the racial supremacy of the whites, and redneckism associated with cowboy culture and the Wild West and America. Today, in the age of Donald Trump, it is becoming even more relevant. Donald Trump is upholding a heroic, blue-eyed image of America. He wants anybody who is not a hero, anybody who is not blue-eyed, anybody who is not rich to be out of the country. So this cynicism of E. Cummings becomes more relevant in today's context. Blue-eyed boy refers to the ideology of white supremacy and redneckism and racism. Blue-eyed boy also means innocence, referring to America's pretensions of innocence while actually harboring injustices. And there's a sudden shift from the reader to Mr. Death. Suddenly you're aware that there is somebody listening to all this. There is somebody else with you that is none other than Mr. Death. He's always there. He'll take us any day. All this heroism and materialism of Americans is not going to do any good when death comes for you. The word Mr. Death creates a creepy feeling that death was present all along. The admiration of Bill, built up in the previous lines, crashes here. So the style of the poem, the typography of the poem is important. It involves the shape of a rancher's rifle, as I showed you. The poet utilizes punctuation-less free verse to mirror the endless play of meanings. Even in a small space or a small word, there are so many meanings at play, endless play of meanings, and impossibility to make conclusions. Since the poet capitalizes the initial letters of Buffalo Bill, Death, and Jesus, it looks like he gives equal status to all these three. All these three are giant myths that should be deconstructed. Death is not an equal thing. Death for the Red Indians and the Buffaloes is not quite the same as death for Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill is a myth. Death is a myth. Jesus is a myth. All these involve power, mythification. The poet does not capitalize I. The poet's subjective perceptions have no great significance here. Probably that's what it means. And finally, an analysis. The poem shows the ambivalent attitude of the poet towards the American ideology of the Wild West. Though it laid the foundations of the American nation, the concept of the Wild West laid the foundations of the American nation, but it also involved white supremacy. It also involved injustices that led to the destruction of nature and to the destruction of Native American cultures, as well as to the oppression of African American slaves. Though Wild West cowboy culture in Cummings' time is a thing of the past, it still has supporters, and Cummings is addressing those supporters. The men who sowed death also had to finally succumb to it. That is the irony. All fundamentalist ideologies will be eventually wiped out by history. The poem has a satirical and irreverent tone that is characteristic of the cowboy language itself. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.